Commander Ara stared at the holographic display floating above her desk. Another failure. Another colony lost. Another report explaining why the Galactic Union's military forces couldn't stop a handful of insurgents armed with outdated weapons and stolen supplies. She leaned back in her chair, her scales shifting from their usual blue to a frustrated. The species showed emotion through color, and right now she didn't care who saw her disappointment. 23 worlds had fallen to insurgent activity in the past year. 23 worlds that should have been easy to defend with the Union's superior technology and vast armies. The problem wasn't equipment or numbers. The Union had both in abundance. The problem was tactics. The insurgents moved like smoke, striking fast and disappearing before Union forces could respond. They hid among civilians, used terrain to their advantage, and seemed to know exactly when and where to attack for maximum damage. Ara had spent 3 months studying every battle, every skirmish, every failed operation. She watched surveillance footage until her eyes hurt. She read tactical analyses from the best military minds in the galaxy. None of it helped. The Union's approach to warfare had worked for centuries. Show up with overwhelming force, establish technological superiority, and wait for the enemy to surrender. But these insurgents didn't surrender. They adapted. She pulled up another file, one marked Restricted, Pre-Contact Species Analysis. The Union monitored developing worlds that hadn't yet achieved faster-than-light travel, mostly to ensure they didn't accidentally stumble into galactic affairs before they were ready. Earth was one such world. Humans, the analysis called them. Ara almost skipped past it. What could primitives teach the most advanced military force in the galaxy? But something in the initial notes caught her attention. Species demonstrates unusual propensity for organized violence. Warning: study of human military history may cause psychological distress. She opened the file. Hours later, Ara sat in darkness, the only light coming from the holographic projections playing around her. She had watched footage of something humans called Special Operations Forces. Navy SEALs swimming through freezing water in the middle of night. SAS soldiers moving through buildings with such precision that their enemies didn't know they were there until it was over. Operatives surviving in frozen wastelands that would kill most species in hours. Delta Force teams appearing from nowhere, completing impossible missions and vanishing again. The tactics were impressive, yes, but that wasn't what held Ara's attention. It was the philosophy behind them, the way humans trained these soldiers. Most species in the Union selected their warriors based on physical traits. They had 4 arms and enhanced reflexes. They were 3 meters tall and could tear through metal. The Harmonites could coordinate perfectly through quantum entanglement. But humans were weak, slow. Their senses were dull compared to most species. They had no natural weapons, no armor, no special abilities. So they broke themselves on purpose. Ara watched a training video called Hell Week. Human candidates were forced to stay awake for days, running endless miles, swimming in freezing ocean water, carrying boats on their heads, all while instructors screamed at them and made everything deliberately harder. At any point, the candidates could quit. They just had to ring a bell. That was the rule. You could stop the pain whenever you wanted. Most did. The video showed row after row of helmets on the ground, each one representing someone who had quit. But some didn't. Some kept going even when their bodies were shutting down, even when every rational thought said to stop. Those were the ones who became SEALs. She watched another video, this time of something called Ranger School. Humans starving themselves, sleeping 2 hours a night, marching until their feet bled, all to learn how to lead soldiers in combat. Not to learn how to shoot better or fight harder. To learn leadership through suffering. They didn't have a word for this concept. The closest translation was voluntary self-destruction for abstract benefit. It made no sense, yet it clearly worked. Ara played footage from actual human combat operations. A team of SEALs infiltrating an enemy compound. They moved in complete darkness, communicated through hand signals, and eliminated threats without making a sound. When something went wrong and their equipment failed, they didn't retreat or call for support. They adapted on the spot, using their environment and their training to complete the mission anyway. She watched a video of British SAS soldiers in a hostage rescue. The operation lasted 17 minutes from start to finish. 17 minutes to breach multiple buildings, neutralize all threats, and evacuate every hostage alive. The speed and precision were impossible, except humans had done it. What fascinated Ara most was how human special forces operated independently. In the Union military, soldiers followed orders from commanders who had access to battlefield data, strategic algorithms, and AI support. Take away those commanders, and most Union soldiers would freeze. But human special forces teams were expected to think for themselves. Their training emphasized making decisions without permission, adapting to changing situations, and completing missions even when everything went wrong. There was a human saying she found repeated in multiple training manuals: 2 is 1, 1 is none. It meant always having backup equipment, backup plans, backup everything. Another saying: slow is smooth, smooth is fast. It meant rushing caused mistakes, but practiced movements became quick through repetition. And another: the only easy day was yesterday. That one didn't need explanation. Ara stood and paced her office. An idea was forming, one that would either save her career or destroy it completely. The Union's military doctrine hadn't changed in centuries because it didn't need to. Overwhelming force had always been enough. But the insurgency proved that assumption wrong. The galaxy needed something new, something that could adapt, operate independently, and survive in the chaos where conventional forces failed. The Union needed its own special operations forces. Not just elite soldiers with better equipment, but warriors trained in the human way. Soldiers who embraced suffering as education, who could think and act without orders, who refused to quit no matter the circumstances. She began drafting her proposal. The High Command would hate it. They would call it barbaric, unnecessary, beneath the dignity of advanced species. They would point out that humans were primitive, that their methods were crude, that the Union had nothing to learn from a species that still used chemical propellant weapons. Ara included video footage in her proposal, not edited highlights, but raw combat recordings that showed exactly what human special forces could do. She added casualty statistics comparing Union operations to human special operations missions. She included psychological assessments explaining why human training methods produced such effective soldiers. The proposal took 3 days to complete. When she finally submitted it to the High Command, she felt the same nervousness she imagined human SEAL candidates felt standing in front of that bell. She could pull it back. She could return to conventional thinking and conventional solutions. Instead, she went to the training facility and started planning a curriculum. If the High Command approved her proposal, she wanted to be ready. And if they didn't, well, she would at least have tried something different. 2 weeks later, her communicator chimed with a priority message. She opened it expecting rejection. Instead, she found conditional approval. The High Command would authorize 1 experimental unit. If it succeeded, the program would expand. If it failed, it would be shut down and never mentioned again. They gave her 6 months to select candidates, complete training, and prove the concept worked. 6 months. Human Special Forces training took years, but Ara had expected resistance, not support. She would take what she could get. She sent out a call for volunteers across the entire Union military. The message was simple: seeking candidates for Experimental Special Operations Unit. Training will be extremely difficult. Most will fail. Those who succeed will become something the galaxy has never seen. Applications flooded in. Thousands of soldiers from dozens of species, all curious about this new opportunity. Ara began the selection process, looking for candidates who showed not just physical ability, but mental resilience. She needed soldiers who wouldn't quit when things got hard. As she reviewed files, Ara pulled up one more human video, a speech given by a human admiral to SEAL graduates. He talked about making your bed every morning, about how small accomplishments built confidence for larger challenges. He talked about getting through Hell Week by focusing on making it to the next meal, not worrying about days ahead. He talked about never ringing the bell. Ara's scales shifted to determined orange. She would build the galaxy's first special operations unit trained the human way. And if it worked, the insurgents would learn what humans already knew. The most dangerous weapon isn't technology or strength. It's the will to never, ever quit. The first candidates arrived at the training facility expecting advanced weapons instruction, tactical simulators, and comfortable quarters. Instead, they found Ara standing in an empty field before dawn, frost covering the ground. "Drop your equipment," she ordered. "Everything except standard fatigues." A named or chosen for his 4 arms and lightning reflexes, tilted his head in confusion. "Commander, we were told this was special operations training." "It is. Drop your equipment." Slowly the candidates, advanced communicators, energy weapons, personal shields, navigation devices, all of it piled on the ground. They stood in the cold morning air wearing only basic clothing, looking at Ara with growing concern. She activated a holographic display showing a mountain range. "That peak is 40 kilometers from here. You have until sunset to reach it. Anyone who doesn't make it is removed from the program." 40 kilometers. A named a breath through his filtration mask. His species lived in methane atmospheres and needed special equipment to survive in oxygen. Walking that distance would take all day. "Then you should start now," Ara said. "But we have no supplies. No food, no water, no navigation equipment." "Correct." A crystalline harmonite called Shard spoke up, his body chiming with confused frequencies. "This makes no sense. We are elite soldiers. We should be learning advanced tactics, not hiking." Ara walked to the equipment pile and picked up a personal shield generator. "This device will keep you safe until its battery dies. Then you're vulnerable." She dropped it. "That communicator will call for help until something jams the signal. Then you're alone." She picked up an energy weapon. "This will eliminate any threat until it overheats or breaks. Then you have nothing." She faced the candidates. Humans train their special forces to operate when everything goes wrong, when equipment fails, when communications are cut, when there's no support coming. They make their soldiers walk 40 kilometers with no supplies because they might need to do it in combat. They starve them, freeze them, and exhaust them because war is unpredictable and brutal. "We have technology to avoid such primitiveness," Or said. "Then explain why we keep losing to insurgents using primitive tactics." Ara's scales shifted to challenging red. "Explain why our superior technology hasn't stopped the attacks. Explain why conventional forces can't adapt when plans fall apart." Silence. "Selection starts now," Ara said. "Reach the peak by sunset or quit, your choice." Most candidates stood frozen, unsure if this was a test they could refuse. A few started walking immediately. One by one, the others followed, though many looked back as if expecting Ara to call it off and reveal the real training. She watched them go. Only 20% would make it. That was the human SEAL success rate she was aiming for. The rest would quit, and that was fine. She needed soldiers who could endure, not soldiers who needed perfect conditions to function. Ara set up observation posts along the route. She watched through cameras as the candidates struggled. The so strong and intimidating had never walked more than a few kilometers in their lives. By hour 3, he was falling behind. The Harmonite's crystalline body conducted temperature too efficiently. In the rising heat of midday, he was overheating. This filtration system wasn't designed for extended physical activity. He had to stop frequently to let it recycle. Good, they were experiencing discomfort. That was the point. By midday, 5 candidates had quit. They activated emergency beacons and retrieval teams picked them up. Ara noted their names. Strong soldiers, excellent records, but unwilling to suffer unnecessarily. That was fine for conventional forces. It wouldn't work for special operations. The remaining candidates pushed on. Some helped each other, sharing techniques for managing exhaustion. Others went silent, focusing inward. Ara watched a young named X who kept stopping to vomit from exhaustion, then continuing anyway. She watched the rig his filtration system to work more efficiently during exertion. She watched Shard the Harmonite deliberately reducing his consciousness to manage the pain his species experienced as discordant vibrations. They were adapting, learning, surviving. By late afternoon, 12 candidates had quit. The remaining group was spread across kilometers of terrain, each struggling in their own way. They collapsed at the 30-kilometer mark and didn't get up. Ara sent a retrieval team. As the sun approached the horizon, Ara stood at the peak waiting. She had placed a simple marker there, a human bell identical to the ones used in SEAL training. Next to it, a sign in multiple languages, ring for transport back, or continue forward. Or arrived first, his 4 arms trembling with exhaustion. He stared at the bell, then at Ara. "Is this the finish?" he asked. "This is a choice," Ara said. "You've proven you can complete a difficult task. You can ring that bell, return to the facility, and no one will think less of you. Or you can keep going." Keep going where? The objective was reaching this peak. The objective is becoming someone who doesn't quit when things are hard. Or looked at the path continuing beyond the peak. No end in sight. No promises about what came next, just more difficulty. He stood there breathing hard, his people's proud military tradition weighing against this human concept of voluntary suffering. He walked past the bell. Others arrived as darkness fell. A Shard, X, 2 more, a mantis-like, each one faced the same choice. Most walked past the bell. 3 rang it and were transported back, content with what they'd accomplished. The ones who continued hiked through the night. Ara followed in a transport vehicle, watching them stumble in the darkness, fall, get up, and keep moving. She didn't help. This was the lesson. You keep going because quitting isn't in your nature anymore. They reached the training facility at dawn, having walked over 60 kilometers total. Ara met them at the entrance. "Congratulations, you've completed day 1. Shard's crystalline form resonated with something between horror and disbelief. Day 1. Day 1 of selection. We have 6 months of training ahead. It gets harder. Several candidates looked like they wanted to quit right there, but they'd walked all night instead of ringing a bell. Something had changed in them during those kilometers of suffering. Humans have a saying, Ara continued. The only easy day was yesterday. Get some food, get some rest. Tomorrow we start real training. She walked away, leaving them to process what they'd signed up for. Behind her, she heard or laugh. Not a happy laugh, but the kind humans made when they realized they'd gotten themselves into something crazy and decided to see it through anyway. Good, that was exactly the mindset she needed. Week 3 of training, and Ara had lost half her remaining candidates. They quit during underwater navigation exercises, during sleep-deprived land navigation, during combat drills that lasted until everyone was too exhausted to think straight. Each time someone quit, Ara felt both disappointment and validation. This was working as intended. The ones who remained weren't necessarily the strongest or fastest. They were the ones who refused to stop. She stood in the tactical center watching her remaining candidates conduct a live fire exercise. 17 soldiers from different species, trying to clear a building complex while instructors used non-lethal weapons to simulate enemy fire. The scenario was deliberately unfair. The enemy had better positions, more numbers, and kept changing tactics. The candidates were failing, again. "Stop," Ara's voice boomed through the training area. "Everyone to the brief room, now." They assembled, covered in paint rounds, breathing hard from the exertion. Ara pulled up footage of their performance. "What went wrong?" she asked. "Or spoke first. We were outnumbered and—" "True, what else?" "The enemy kept adapting their defense," added. "Every time we tried a new approach, they countered it." "Also true, X." The young thought carefully. "We followed the plan even when it stopped working." Ara's scales shifted to approving green. "Explain." "We had a good plan for initial entry, but when the enemy adapted, we kept trying to execute the original plan instead of changing our approach." "And why is that a problem?" "Because the enemy gets a vote," X said, repeating a human phrase from the tactical manuals they'd been studying. "Plans fall apart when contact is made." Ara played a video of human special forces conducting a similar exercise. The team entered the building, encountered resistance, and immediately adapted. Hand signals changed tactics. Soldiers shifted positions without being ordered. When their primary approach failed, they switched to an alternative without hesitation. "Notice something?" Ara asked. "No one stops to request permission. No one waits for updated orders. Each soldier thinks independently while maintaining team coordination. How do they do that?" Silence. This was the hardest concept for non-humans to grasp. Most military forces relied on command hierarchy. Soldiers executed orders from leaders who had better information. But human special forces inverted that model. The soldiers on the ground were expected to make decisions because they had the best information about immediate threats. "They trust each other," Shard said suddenly. His crystalline form resonated with understanding. "Each soldier knows how the others will react. They've trained together so much that they think similarly." "Show me," Ara said. "Run the exercise again. No communication devices. Hand signals only. No designated leader. Figure it out together." The candidates looked at each other nervously. Every previous exercise had assigned clear roles and leaders. This violated everything they knew about military operations. "You have 1 hour to plan," Ara said. "Then we run it again." She watched through cameras as they argued about approach, or wanted to use his 4 arms to establish fire superiority. Suggested using his species' smaller size for infiltration. Shard proposed coordinating through his quantum connection with another Harmonite candidate. Each idea was species-specific, playing to individual strengths. X finally said something that made everyone stop. What would humans do? They pulled up their tactical manuals, studied human small unit tactics, argued about applications. Ara smiled. They were learning to think like humans without realizing it. The exercise started. Immediately, things went wrong. The enemy changed their defensive positions. 2 candidates got killed in the first minute, but instead of falling apart, the team adapted, or didn't try to dominate with firepower. He moved to cover a weak angle. Didn't infiltrate alone. He coordinated with another candidate for mutual support. When their entry point became untenable, they shifted to an alternative without discussion. It wasn't perfect. They made mistakes, but they completed the objective with half the casualties of previous attempts. Ara called them back to the brief room. "Better, not good, but better. What changed?" "We stopped trying to be the best individually," Or said, flexing his 4 arms thoughtfully. "Started thinking like a unit." "Like a human unit," X added. "Their tactics work because everyone trains the same way. Individual abilities matter less than team cohesion." "Correct, you're beginning to understand. Humans overcome their physical limitations through teamwork and adaptability. That's what we're building here." Ara pulled up their training schedule. "Tomorrow we start underwater operations. 3 days after that, Arctic survival. Next week, high-altitude insertion training." Groans echoed through the room. "I know you're tired. I know this is harder than anything you've experienced. Humans have another saying, embrace the suck. It means accepting that some things are going to be miserable and doing them anyway." "Why?" I asked. "Why design training to be miserable on purpose?" Because combat is miserable. Because missions go wrong. Because at some point, every special operations soldier faces a moment where they're cold, hungry, exhausted, and have to complete the objective anyway. Humans learned that you can't simulate that kind of pressure. You can only prepare for it by experiencing something similarly difficult. Ara dismissed them to rest. As they filed out, she heard them talking about the next day's training, not complaining exactly, more like warriors sharing war stories. They were bonding over shared suffering, another human concept that seemed universal once you experienced it. Week 7 brought a crisis. During underwater training in freezing water, Shard began to crack. His crystalline structure couldn't handle the thermal stress. Medical staff pulled him out and recommended removal from the program. Ara visited him in the medical bay. Shard's body resonated with harmonics of failure and shame. "I cannot continue," he said. "My species is not built for this." "No species is built for this," Ara replied. "That's the point. Humans aren't naturally suited for freezing water either, but they do it because the mission might require it. My body is cracking, literal structural damage. Can it be repaired?" "Yes, but—" "Then rest, heal, and return to training." Shard's harmonics shifted to confusion. "You would allow this? In conventional training, I would be eliminated for failing a physical requirement." "This isn't conventional training. Humans allow candidates to heal from injuries and return. They understand that the body can fail while the mind remains committed. I've watched you push through pain that other Harmonites couldn't imagine. You haven't quit. Your body needs repair, not your resolve. The other candidates are ahead of me now." "Then you'll work harder to catch up. That's also a very human thing to do." Shard took 2 weeks to heal, then returned. He struggled with exercises the others had already mastered, but no one mocked him. Instead, they helped, or stayed late to coach him through close-quarters combat. X swam alongside him during underwater drills, encouraging him. A shared tips for managing pain during extended operations. Ara watched this bonding with satisfaction. Human special operations units functioned as families, not just military formations. That kind of cohesion couldn't be ordered. It had to develop through shared hardship. Month 4 brought unexpected validation. Union intelligence intercepted chatter about a small insurgent cell planning an attack. The High Command wanted to send conventional forces. Ara requested permission to use her training unit instead. "They're not ready," General protested. "They're as ready as they'll ever be sitting in a training facility. Humans say you train until combat, not until perfection. Let them prove the concept." Reluctantly, the High Command approved a limited operation. Ara selected 6 candidates, or X, a Shard, and 2 others. They would infiltrate the insurgent position, gather intelligence, and extract without engaging unless necessary. The team prepared using the planning process they'd learned from human tactical manuals. They studied the terrain, developed primary and alternative plans, rehearsed until hand signals became instinct. Ara watched but didn't intervene. They needed to operate independently. The insertion went smoothly. Under cover of darkness, the team reached the insurgent compound. They moved like human special forces, slow, deliberate, professional. Hand signals coordinated movement. Each soldier covered their sector without being told. Then everything went wrong. The intelligence was incomplete. There weren't 3 insurgents. There were 12, and they'd set up defensive positions covering all approaches. Ara monitored from orbit, resisting the urge to order retreat. This was the test, not whether they could execute a perfect plan, but how they'd respond when plans failed. X signaled the team to fall back to a covered position. They assessed the new situation without panicking, or spotted a weakness in the defensive setup, suggested a flanking approach that used his small size advantage. Shard proposed creating a distraction. They didn't call for instructions. They adapted their plan and executed. The operation lasted 47 minutes. They gathered the required intelligence, neutralized 3 insurgents who discovered them, and extracted with no friendly casualties. It wasn't clean. It wasn't perfect, but it was effective. Back on the ship, Ara conducted the after-action review. She expected pride, maybe some celebration. Instead, the team immediately started discussing mistakes and improvements. "We should have identified that blind spot faster," X said. "My distraction was too obvious," Shard added. "Human tactical manuals suggest subtler approaches." "We bunched up during the extraction," Or noted. "One explosive could have eliminated the entire team." Ara listened to them critique their successful mission. This was perhaps the most human thing they'd done yet. Never satisfied, always improving, never celebrating success when you could be preparing for the next challenge. "You completed a successful operation under difficult circumstances," Ara said. "You adapted when the situation changed. You worked as a unit without orders. Most importantly, you didn't quit when things got hard. This is exactly what human special forces do." "But we made mistakes," X protested. "Of course you did. Humans make mistakes too. The difference is they learn from them." Ara pulled up statistics comparing this operation to conventional Union missions with similar parameters. Traditional forces would have called for support and waited for overwhelming advantage. That would have given the insurgents time to escape. You pressed forward with what you had. That's the human way. The team looked at the comparison data. Their operation had been faster, cleaner, and more effective than conventional approaches. Not because they were stronger or better equipped, but because they thought differently. Training continued. The team grew sharper, more confident. They internalized human principles: 2 is 1, 1 is none. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Never quit. Other candidates watched their success and pushed harder. The culture was spreading. Month 5 brought the final test. A full-scale combat simulation against military instructors trained specifically to defeat them. The scenario was intentionally impossible. Extract a hostage from a defended compound with limited intelligence, no support, and enemies who knew they were coming. Ara gave them one instruction: complete the mission or ring the bell. She'd placed a human bell at their base camp, same as SEAL training. They could quit any time, no shame, just acknowledgement that the task exceeded their capabilities. The team looked at the bell, then at each other, then at the mission parameters. "We're going to need a very good plan," Or said. They planned for 2 days, studied human tactics for similar scenarios, developed 4 different approaches with contingencies for each, rehearsed until their movements became muscle memory. The operation began at midnight. Ara watched from the command center, monitoring multiple camera feeds. The instructors had set up a nearly perfect defense: motion sensors, overlapping fields of fire, quick reaction forces. It was everything the insurgents would use, amplified by Union military expertise. The team infiltrated through a route the instructors thought impossible. They bypassed sensors using techniques from human SEAL training. They neutralized guards with non-lethal precision that human special forces would recognize. When they reached the hostage, they found another complication. The room was rigged to explode. This was the moment. Call for support, wait for bomb disposal experts, do things the safe conventional way, or adapt and improvise like humans would. X studied the device. "I can disarm it, maybe, 60% confident." "I've seen human combat engineers do this," A said. "They have a saying: if you're going to be dumb, you've got to be tough." "That's not encouraging," Shard noted. "Neither is leaving the hostage," Or replied. "X, you have 5 minutes. Rest of us establish a perimeter. If this goes wrong, we go loud and extract anyway." X worked while the others secured the area. 2 minutes passed. 3. Ara watched, forcing herself not to intervene, 4 minutes. Sweat dripped down X's scales despite the temperature-controlled suit. Click, the device disarmed. They extracted the hostage using a route that shouldn't have existed, fought through a quick reaction force, and reached the extraction point 17 seconds before the time limit. In the command center, the military instructors sat in stunned silence. General turned to Aura. "How did they do that?" "They thought like humans," Aura replied simply. The next day, she assembled all remaining candidates, 17 soldiers from 12 different species. They'd started with 48. These 17 had endured everything human training threw at them and refused to quit. "Tomorrow you graduate," Aura announced. "You'll become the first Galactic Union Special Operations Unit, but today I want to show you something." She played a video message from Earth. The High Command had finally authorized contact with human military forces. On screen, a human admiral in naval uniform spoke. "We understand you've been training soldiers using our methods. We're honored. Special operations requires a specific mindset that transcends species. It's about refusing to quit when others would, adapting when plans fail, and trusting your team with your life. From what we've seen, you understand these principles. Welcome to a very small community. We look forward to working with you." The candidates watched in awed silence. Recognition from the species that created these methods meant everything. "Unit 0, Aura said, using their official designation for the first time. "You've proven that human special operations principles work across species barriers. Other units are already forming based on what you've accomplished. You're now the standard. That means you carry responsibility for everyone who follows." "What happens next?" Or asked. "Next, we put you to work. The insurgency hasn't stopped. They've spread to 4 more worlds while you've been training. Conventional forces still can't stop them, but you're not conventional forces anymore." She pulled up mission briefings. Real operations waiting for real solutions. The kind of problems that needed adaptable, resilient, independently thinking soldiers. The kind of problems humans had taught the galaxy how to solve. "Study the missions, plan your approaches, you deploy in 48 hours. Aura looked at each of them. "Humans have one more saying I want you to remember. The only easy day was yesterday. This training was hard. Combat will be harder, but you've already proven you won't quit." The candidates dispersed to begin planning. Aura watched them go, feeling pride mixed with apprehension. They were ready as 6 months could make them, but combat would test them in ways training never could. Her communicator chimed. A message from the High Command. "Additional funding approved. Begin recruitment for Unit 1 immediately." Aura smiled. The human way was spreading. Soon, the Union would have special operations forces on every fleet in every sector. Soldiers who could adapt, improvise, and overcome. Soldiers who understood that technology could fail but training never did. Soldiers who refused to quit. She pulled up the application system and started reviewing candidates for the next class. Among thousands of applicants, one file caught her attention. A request from Earth. Human military advisors wanted to observe the training, see what their methods looked like when applied across species. One note attached. "We'd like to see what you learned, and maybe teach you a few things we haven't written down yet." Aura's scales shifted to amused orange. The students were about to meet their teachers. That would be interesting. Humans probably had decades of special operations experience that wasn't in any manual. Little tricks and techniques passed down through generations of warriors who lived the lifestyle. She approved the request. If humans wanted to help train Unit 1, she wouldn't refuse. After all, these were their methods. Who better to teach them? As she closed out reports for the day, Aura looked at the human bell she'd kept in her office. It sat on her desk, a reminder of what the training represented. The bell wasn't about quitting. It was about choice. Every candidate could have rung it, could have stopped the pain, could have returned to comfortable conventional forces. But they didn't, and that made all the difference. Tomorrow, Unit Zero would deploy on their first real mission. They would face actual enemies with actual weapons in actual combat. Some might die. All would be tested beyond anything training could simulate. But Ara had confidence in them, not because they were the strongest or fastest or best equipped. Because they understood what humans had learned long ago. The most powerful weapon wasn't technology or strength. It was the will to keep fighting when everything said to stop. It was the refusal to quit when quitting made perfect sense. It was the sound of silence where a bell should ring. Unit Zero was ready. The galaxy's insurgents were about to learn what humanity already knew. Special operations wasn't about being special. It was about being too stubborn to quit, too adaptive to predict, and too well-trained to defeat. The human way had come to the stars, and the galaxy would never be the same.